Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Phil Wildman. So we are an insurance broker based in the UK, but we work internationally. So I set us up about 7 or 8 years ago. I've been doing insurance 20 years. I've been playing games since I was 3 or 4 years old. Super passionate about the video game industry. We're part of a bigger insurance group. The games bit is really my baby. I love doing this. And yeah, we work with studios all around the world, from small indies up to big AAA publishers, helping them understand and demystify insurance, giving them risk advice, and helping them protect themselves against stuff that can go wrong, and then occasionally selling a policy or two. So I'm here today to talk about scary insurance stories, but hopefully this is more of a positive video. This is kind of like top tips on how to avoid stuff going wrong and how to use your insurance policies and what to avoid. So
how to get out of a scary haunted house, or at least
right, sort of, yeah, how to navigate it. And I think a lot of like fear around insurance is because it's not very well understood. And it doesn't help that the insurance industry does not really understand the games industry too well, and vice versa. So we're kind of like in that Venn diagram. We're like kind of in the middle between like, oh, hey, we care and understand about games, and then we advocate that to the insurance industry to try to get the insurers on board with the kind of risks and nuances of making interactive entertainment. So look, I'm just going to dive into a few sort of top tips. It's going to be a bit of a quick fire thing, but these are going to be some of the main, I don't want to say like bugbears of mine, but I see these problems come up over and over again. And I'm going to say that the first thing would be being transparent with your insurance. So as you're going through the process of buying insurance, you want to be super transparent with what you're doing. Whether you're working direct with an insurer or with a broker that's in your industry, it's usually helpful to talk to somebody that knows your space. But the games industry is naturally quite secretive about what they're doing. NDAs are really, really common. And you may feel like, oh, we're working on this like really cool unannounced project, and the company line is, we don't talk about it. Like, we do not talk about what we're doing to external parties. But then, of course, they'll come along to us, for example, and say, oh, hey, we want insurance for what we're doing. My first question is going to be, what are you doing?
I need to know what you're doing.
This is a real example. I'm not going to name names, but we had a company that was like, well, we don't want to tell you what we're doing. It's under an NDA. I said, fine, I'll sign an NDA. So I signed the NDA, and they still didn't want to tell me what they were doing. And I was like, look, you really need to help me here, because if you're working on a racing game, like a car racing game, it's a different risk profile, because you're working with like licensed IP, you're working with the cars, the liveries, the logos, even the tracks themselves. There's so many things that could be an issue there. If it's a contemporary racing game, there's a very different risk profile to whether it's like a kart game like Mario Kart. It's all made up stuff. You're not going to have Ferrari.
All fantasy. It's
so
real life.
Relevant what you're doing, whether there's motion capture in the game, whether you've got mocap rigs in your office or not. And we've run into it on one particular occasion where they just did not want to tell us what they were doing. And ultimately, they ended up going to another broker. So, this broker didn't ask any questions, so we're more comfortable with them. That is the wrong thing to do. So, you've got to be transparent with what you're doing. Overshare. Now, everything that you share with your broker and your insurer is super confidential. Like, the insurers are going to be insuring your competitors as well, probably. There's no advantage to them like sharing that information. It doesn't work. And the games industry is not unique in that. A lot of these insurers will cover things like energy insurance or property insurance or all kinds of things. And they know what all these companies are doing. They know the inner workings of them. They're just not going to be, it's not going to get leaked. That just doesn't happen. So, the reason that I'm drilling this point home is if you don't share what you're doing and you have a claim and the insurer is like, well, I didn't know you were doing this, or it wasn't disclosed, you're going to have such a harder time versus we told you we did this and you said you would cover it.
Yeah.
So that is my biggest tip of the day, is like, make sure you tell your broker and get it in writing as well, ideally, that you've shared this, you've told them this. And if you work with a broker that knows what they're doing, they also should be able to ask questions and pull on threads, because you maybe don't know what you need to share.
No, you don't always. You don't know.
Yeah. So you might think, oh, it's just a video game, but
Yeah.
the example I gave is like, well, it is relevant if it's a driving game versus a platforming game versus you're working. If it's a contemporary game in the modern day, then it's even the clothes you're wearing. It's like, well, actually, those jeans look like Levi's, so you get some, or the car looks like too much like a Ford or whatever, versus a fantasy medieval game, like less worried about stuff like that. So it's complicated. It's complicated, and getting sued for copyright infringement and all that is
not what anybody wants. Not what
anybody wants. That's scary. Yeah. So that's one of my good tips. Another top tip, and you're going to hate me for saying this, but read your policy wordings. This is what you're paying for.
Yes.
So take the time. If you're going to be, some of these insurance policies, especially if you're a larger company, you could be talking tens of thousands. Some of our bigger companies pay hundreds of thousands for their policies. If you're paying that much money, get a full understanding of what it is you're paying for. Think to yourself, what am I really worried about? What is it that's keeping me up at night?
Yeah.
Don't just go out and buy insurance.
Yeah.
Is it professional liability insurance, errors and omissions? We've got another video on that. Is it cyber insurance? Are you worried about media liability? Are you worried about saying something on a stream? There's lots of different things. Are you selling a company and you're worried about something that might come out after the fact? There's lots of different types of insurance. It's the right tool for the right job. Read your wording, explain it to your broker or insurer, and make sure you know what you're covered for. It's not like buying car insurance or house insurance where it's fairly commoditized and the policies are all pretty much the same. In the USA,
and also
there's even
pretty straightforward because you know what's going to go. There's only so many things that can go wrong with a car, I would say, versus what can go wrong with a game or a studio or any of that.
So don't treat it like it's just an annoyance or an overhead or something that you just need to get through once a year when you go through your renewal and then forget about it. Treat the process as taking your business seriously and taking your risk seriously. Work with your broker, work with the insurers. You want to get to the point where you're addressing your risks and putting good practices in place so that ideally you don't have a claim. The idea of insurance is not to just buy it and be like, hey, I have insurance, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to do whatever. The idea is to be, it's a two-way street with you and your insurer. And if you want to find a good insurer that's going to help you and give you the tips and advice that you need to avoid the issue, because they don't want to pay claims either.
No.
So they're gonna give you as much advice and help as they can to try to not
prevent you from making bad decisions.
Yeah. They would never like just not pay a valid claim. But they'd rather you didn't have a claim in the first place, right? So choose good partners that will work with you on that space. So read the wording, understand what you're buying, and take the process seriously, even though it might be something you don't fully understand or it's expensive. Just take your time. It's there to help you. It's mutually beneficial. So cool. Another good top tip is the insurance onboarding process. Looking at the application forms, you might be in receipt of an application form and roll your eyes and be like, oh no, I've got to fill out a 10-page long application form. This is super boring. I just can't I just buy it? Those forms are actually really, really important. Obviously, I would say that because I'm in the industry, but
you're biased kind of here. So.
I'm a little biased. But the reason insurers ask all those questions is they're trying to identify the potential risks or gaps in your knowledge. It's not to make it difficult for you. It's almost to help you. So they'll ask questions like, and this is one that's raised a few eyebrows. So there's one question that is in some of our forms where we say, have you employed anyone from a direct competitor in the last 12 months? Now, of course, everybody in the games industry is going to be like, well, kind of, because probably every games company could be a potential competitor.
Yeah.
What that really means is we're kind of getting them to think about, well, the follow-up to that is what are you doing about managing restrictive covenants and NDAs? And have you thought about somebody coming into the office with a hard disk or a flash drive with a load of code and assets and stuff that they worked on, that they personally might feel like, well, I did that work, so
I did it, it's mine. Yeah.
Yeah, but actually under contract, it's not. So if they come across, work for you, put a load of code base into your new game, you ship it, and then it turns out that was directly ripped from, I don't know, let's say Nintendo, or something. Nintendo's not going to be too happy about that.
No.
So then your company is in the firing line. So the reason that we ask that question is not because we're stupid and we're like, oh, we obviously everyone is from a competitor.
But no,
it's actually to prompt them to think about, hey, what is your onboarding process, and are you sort of taking that into consideration? So these application forms are not designed to be intentionally awkward and difficult. A lot of the questions there are there to help you think about your risks. And you could even take these application forms and not even with an intention to buy the insurance, but just go through them. And if you can find a friendly broker that's willing to spend time with you, go through it and look at your risks and look at kind of questions they're asking. Cyber insurance, for example, and I think I might have mentioned this on a previous video, is a lot of the requirements for cyber insurance are there because insurers pay out a ton of claims in that space. So the kind of questions they're going to be asking you will be like super relevant. So, okay, are you doing offsite backups? What are you, if you had a fire in your server room, could you be up and running again at a second site? And it gets you thinking about all of this, and you can even just use it like a shopping list of things to implement.
Yeah, look at it. They think through every aspect of the risk management process with it, so it gives you an opportunity to look at something else that'll help give you ideas of, okay, what else can you be doing to prevent risk with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. Another really good tip here is if you're in receipt of a contract that's asking you to get insurance. So if you're a developer working with a publisher, and this might be your first publishing deal, and you've been working really, really hard, and you've got knockbacks from everywhere, and you finally got a publishing deal, and it's got this really complicated insurance clause in there. Don't be afraid to push back. This is just a general tip anyway with contracts, is don't be afraid to push back on stuff. Some of these publishing agreements are onerous, and obviously they're there to favor the publisher. So ideally, you'd be working with a good lawyer, and they'd be there to sort of advocate for you and make sure they're redlining the right things. When it comes to the insurance requirements as well, some of them are asking for things like $5 million of insurance, and you need this insurance and that insurance, and you need auto liability. Even we've seen in some contracts where they just it's just some boilerplate requirement that they've not
that they've left in there, and it's not.
Sometimes the publisher themselves doesn't even really understand the insurance, and they're just like, well, let's just copy and paste this, and it creates a situation where the developers might feel obliged to buy insurances over the top. So some things you can push back on. Don't be afraid to push back. Say, why do you need me to get 5 million? Would 1 be okay? And sometimes you can just go and get a comprehensive quote, but much more modest requirements, and show them that and say, hey, I can get this. Would that be okay? And I'd say 9 times out of 10 they probably just say yes. Okay,
so pushing back can definitely say.
Yeah, don't be afraid to push back. Just general advice anyway. If you're in receipt of any contract, don't be afraid to push back on stuff. Just because it's your first deal, don't get nervous about that. They'll probably respect you more for doing it. We're here to help if you're not sure about what to push back on when it comes to insurance and how to save money. So cool.
Amazing.
What else? Right, another top. Okay, yeah. Right. So another good tip here. So if something changes to your business halfway through the year, so generally insurance would be there for a year, if something happens to your business midway through, either you launch the game or you get acquired or something big changes, like tell the insurer or tell your broker, keep them in the loop. The reason for that is you want to make sure that they're on board with the changes. It may be that something happens and the insurer says, actually, we're not comfortable anymore. We don't want to cover you anymore. You're better off finding out at that point and then getting a refund for the rest of the year or something, or trying to find a different insurer that's either, let's say you've grown and the game's been super successful, and your current insurer is like, oh, it's a bit too big for us, we don't want to do it anymore. Better that you find out at that time. So I've mentioned a few times about being transparent, but this should be a two-way street. Whichever broker or insurer you're working with, there should be an open dialogue there.
Be besties with your broker is what I'm understanding. You tell them when life changes. You tell them when life changes. You tell them when things happen, and you tell them everything.
Yeah. If you've got any like crazy ideas, let them know. Be like, hey, we're thinking about doing this, or okay, this is a real question that was asked of us. It's like, we were thinking of bringing along a real tank to one of our expos. Are we insured for that? It's like, probably, but not with this insurer. We can ask around for you. So it's stuff like that. And sometimes our clients are really great and they tell us everything, and other times I'll be at an expo and they'll have a stand there and they're doing something that is wildly not insured, and I'm like,
oh no.
Why didn't they tell us about that? Or I'll see something where they've got like a load of merch and kids toys is another thing. Like if you're getting into the merch space, look at what you're this is actually a whole tip in itself. So another tip. Merch. If you're doing physical merch and toys and you're in that space, look into the contract and the rights of recourse between you and your supplier. Most companies that we've come across that are doing this outsource it completely. So they use a third party fulfillment company to basically take the IP. They will create the models, the figurines, the toys, the games, whatever, ship them and distribute them. Now, watch out though for those contracts, because some of those companies will say, we're not liable for any IP issues. We're not liable for the product liability. Product liability would be someone's injured from the product, and they push that liability back down to you. So you want to be really careful. Look at these contracts and make sure who's liable for what. Don't just assume that you've outsourced it. They're taking responsibility. Depending on who you're using, they may try to push that back to you, and you may not be aware, especially if it's kids' toys. As a game studio, it's assumed generally that your products are digital games. It's not like physical stuff. So if you're in that space, another good tip, claims. My tip with claims is don't try and hide it. Don't wait until everything has happened and blown up and you've been sued and now you need to pay somebody $5 million. So we better call the insurers now. Tell your broker, tell your insurers as early as possible. Don't be afraid. There's a lot of thing about being too afraid to tell your insurer that something might happen. So, this might impact my policy next year. I'm worried about they're going to push my price up. That's actually not the case. They may put your price up if it turns out that you are, running a terrible business and being super risky. But generally, they will appreciate that you've gone to the effort to tell them, because they will not want to pay a claim. They will pay a valid claim, obviously, but if there's a circumstance, because they probably have seen this all before, they've seen these kind of things happen many, many times, they will probably be able to give you some really, really good advice to either shut it down quickly or minimize the loss as much as possible. So as soon as that happens, they're kind of in it with you. So they're both committed. You bought the policy, so they're in it one way or another. So your best bet is to share the information with them and say, look, this has happened. Like, am I covered for this if this continues to manifest? And what can we do to try to minimize our losses as much as possible? So notify your claims early. Don't try and hide it. If you're coming up to a renewal, do not hide an issue. This has happened a couple of times where I'm not going to name names, but we've had clients that have basically had issues that they knew about, and they went through a renewal, and then a couple of months later they're like, oh, by the way, we're being sued for this. Can we have cover? And it creates a really, really awkward scenario where we're like, oh, you really should have told us, because, you know, the insurers may have covered it, but they might have said, look, you know, you're an existing client. We're going to charge a little bit extra because nothing's happened yet, but it might happen.
It might happen, and then
we just want to be fair to them as well. Like, you know, there's a little bit more risk here. But if you just like hide it and then hope that you can like push through a claim later, because they're going to find out like just don't do that. Don't do that. You're in it together. Don't try and screw over the insurers. So following on from what I said about being transparent with an insurer is, if an insurer declines to cover you, do not be disappointed or annoyed. It's actually a good thing. That means they do not want your risk. So if you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have put that on the form, now I've been declined, that's a good thing. That means you haven't just wasted your money. So yeah, if you don't feel like it's a race to get the insurance. Don't feel like, oh, hey, I really need this cover, and you're annoyed because they don't want to cover you because you said, oh, hey, we do Web3, and you're like, oh, well, your coverage is denied now. Don't be annoyed by that. That's actually a good thing, because if you'd hidden that and then it turns out later like, oh, we don't cover Web3, well, that was a waste of money. You're better off not having insurance than paying for insurance and not being covered.
Than paying for insurance that doesn't end up helping you. So
absolutely,
that's where the real wasted money ends up being.
So another top tip.